you're supporting in recovery. And when I say recovery, I'm not talking about just drugs. I'm talking about life. Life is a mess, right? We're all trying to get something better in different areas of our lives. Now, I know that harm reduction has often been focused on things like drug use and sexual activity and those kinds of things. But I want you to think of harm reduction as a preventive lifestyle choice, right? Like we can choose to be safe and healthy or not. And we know, most of us, most of the time, kind of know what those things are for us. Sometimes we don't, right? And an effective helping agent knows when to move in and out of those spaces, right? But motivational interviewing from its core is about letting people figure out things for themselves, okay? So I'm gonna kind of just talk through that process. I'm gonna go back to the original proponent of this particular model, and then we'll talk a little bit about culture. Now, originally I had Steve Diggs, who was one of my colleagues from Be More Power, doing this presentation with me, but he was unavailable to attend today, so it'll be just me. Hopefully, I won't disappoint. Y'all ready? Let's go. Okay, the opening quote for today's session is this. This comes from a song, I hate to say back from the 70s because it dates how old I am, but from a band called America, and it was kind of, at that point, a kind of a contemporary rock band. But there's a line in there that says, "The Wizard of Oz never gave the Lion, the Tin Man, or the Scarecrow that which they did not already possess," right? And that is the whole foundation of motivational interviewing, right? That you're not giving anybody anything. All you're doing is unleashing or unlocking that which they already have. Sometimes we need to be reminded of that. And I know all of us in this room have had moments where people have seen potential in us that we did not see in ourselves, right? They might, it doesn't matter. They might see a speaker, a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, or whatever, but they see it, and we're just not there yet. And then there was a process of walking into that skill or that gift or that awareness, right? Okay. So I just want to recap real quick about behavior change. Normally I open this up for a discussion, right? Like how do we know when to help and how to help others, right? And this can go on forever, and people are just brilliant in their contributions, but I don't have time for that today, so I'm gonna sum it up for you. And there will be many more points to this particular question. I'm gonna give you some of the primary ones. So when people are trying to change their behavior, let me kind of sum it up. There's two things that have to occur. One, the person has to be aware of it, right? They got to recognize that it's something that they want to change. Prior to that, there's no magic formula that you can exercise that's going to do that. Because if it's not an issue in their mind or it's not in their awareness, there's nothing for them to do, right? All right, so let's just start with that. They have to acknowledge. Notice I'm saying they, not you, the outside person who sees it as a problem. They have to see it as something they want to change. Number two, they got to want to do something about it. All right, so those are not the same thing. Just because I become aware that I have problem behavior or something in my life that I want to change doesn't mean I necessarily want to do something about it. Look, if you define me as an ass, I might be, yeah, I'm an ass, I know it, and what? Like, I'm not trying to, I like being a, a person to change their awareness or their thoughts into action, those are two completely different steps. And we know the latter is much more challenging, right? It's one thing to get it up here. It's another thing to change our behavior. So in sum, real quick, we know behavioral change, especially when assisting others, it's difficult. It can be time consuming. And I guarantee you in the time consuming department, everybody's pace is different, right? So this third one happens at infield. Most people aren't going to change at the pace that you do. And so if you're a helping agent and you know you're ready for their change, they just may not be there, or it might take them a year, or it might take you a week, or vice versa. Okay, we've already talked about awareness not being enough. I want to speak to relapse because in the abstinence model, particularly the older models, a relapse was seen as a sign of not taking their recovery seriously. Like if they weren't completely abstinent, then they weren't serious about changing or being different. We know, and I just want you to think of this, of any bad habit that you have ever had that you have tried to change. I don't care how biting your nails, right? Like that's one I worked on for years and years, biting my nails, and I finally overcame it. I got ahead of it. But because those pathways are so ingrained in who I am and what I do, guess what happens every once in a while when I'm sitting there, right? And then I'll be like, oh damn, right? Revisiting those old familiar pathways, those old comfortable shoes, because right, the pathways are established, they're well walked in our forest. That's why trying to do something new is so difficult. You got to clear the path. You got to brush away all the leaves and the stumps and all that kind of thing. You got to walk the path. That's a lot of work to do something new. So relapse in recovery is normal and expected, not encouraged, normal and expected. We're going to fall off the wagon sometimes. We're going to revisit old habits, whether they're healthy or not. That's part of the move. In fact, sometimes it's very helpful to revisit that stuff because we know we don't want to go back there and continue. My brother, who was in recovery since a teenager, he used to guest lecture in my classes, and it was amazing. He would just level the audience with his insight and his shares, and at the end of it, he would say, "Hey, I did this for me. Like I did this to remind myself of where I don't want to be, right? Like and where I've been." And I was like, "Well, that's brilliant, right? Like not that it wasn't a giving service in that moment to the audience, but rather he was saying this helps me be a better person." Okay, so sometimes we fall back, and that's okay. All right. The quote that's is an African proverb: "The devil you know is better than the angel you don't." That's why people don't like to engage in new behaviors. It's unfamiliar, which means uncomfortable territory. Like I know you think this is a great thing for me to do, but I know this model. That's why people in unsatisfying relationships stay so much longer than they're supposed to. Not because they don't know it's not good for them, but it's predictable. They know what to expect. At least here, I know what to do, right? And so getting on that new path can be very challenging. Okay, so let's talk about motivational interview. It comes from a school of thought in psychology called a humanistic existential model. I don't have time to really go through all of it. This is a reminder of what we are supposed to be doing in motivational interviewing. And this comes from Carl Rogers. For those of you who ever took a psych class, you might remember the name Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. Again, it was a pyramid that had 5 tiers in the beginning. And so we don't have time to go through all that, but Carl Rogers was a student of Maslow's, and he came up with the first therapeutic model in counseling about how to help someone. And you'd be surprised his posture. It was very, very unintrusive. He would sit there and just listen to you in silence, reflect on what you said, and then let you keep talking through it. And it was a very, very grueling thing to watch because we think of counseling and therapeutic and supporting help as being intervention, which means the person needs information, they need direction, they need guidance. And I'm not dismissing or minimizing any of that. What I'm saying is it depends on where you want that help to come from. Do you want that to be inward from the person, that they get it, they assume responsibility for that? Or do you want, does the person, just the client or the participant, just want to be told? And look, I see value in both of them. Sometimes I don't want to figure it out for myself. I want somebody just to tell me what the hell to do, right? Like I can't process it too much, I'm whatever. And sometimes people need to step back and allow me to figure it out for myself. Well, this model truly embraces the latter, right? And some of the psychobabble that's on the thing in front of you, incongruent, right? Incongruent just means we're all broken, right? We're all trying to become something different or better, and we're always evolving to that, right? So incongruence is when all of our different selves actually merge into one, and we are actually being the person that we want to be, right? The true self, or you might have heard it referred to as the actualized self. Unconditional positive regard, that next term is just a psychobabble for total acceptance of the person. Not agreement of their actions, but rather here it is okay. and you are not judged. And I understand that that is part of your journey, which has brought you to this moment right now, and I respect and honor that. Just like you would want them to respect and honor yours. Empathy, of course, is being able to put yourself in their shoes, see it from their perspective, but it is about, look at that next bullet, client person-centered therapy. What that means is they are their best expert, not you. They are their best expert, and all you're doing is engaging in reflective conversation for them to see that. I hope that was clear. I know this is a crash course. I need to keep moving. Okay. All right, hopefully y'all are following me. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the stages of change model. Probably most of you have seen this in some form or fashion. And it's a model that we use to help identify where somebody is in their movement for change, right? Now, here's the key. This is what helping folks forget all the time. Folks, this model is not for your client. It's not for your participant. In other words, what I mean by that, this is for you to help identify where they are. They don't know nothing about contemplation and maintenance and pre-contemplation. I mean, they might know those terms. They don't know it in terms of this transactional model, right? So in other words, your client is not going to come to you in session and say, you know what, I'm in contemplation. You know, I see that gym across the street and I'm contemplating whether nobody talks like that, right? These are titles for you to help understand where they are and then use that in conversation to help know where they want to go. That's it, right? So this is really more for the helping agent than it is the person, if that makes sense. When you start translating these stages into your sessions, you need to talk to them in real terms, right? You don't tell them they're in contemplation. You say, oh, I see that you recognize this is something that you might want to do something about, as an example. Okay, everybody got it? All right, we're going to keep moving. All right. Now, what is motivational interviewing? These are just some working definitions. You might have one different or better. Arranging conversations so that people talk themselves into change based on their own values and interests. A collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. And I love this last one, kindness with skill, right? Kindness with skill. And folks, for those of you who want any of this information, just reach out to me. It's not a problem if you're trying to take it. I am talking fast. Okay. Now, the title of this particular session was Keeping the Cultural Boundaries Real. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, okay. First of all, motivational interviewing is a tool to help people realize where they are and then where they want to be. As helping agents, that area can become gray very, very quickly. And that's why I do not like the title motivational interviewing, because my first question to it always is, well, whose motivation are we talking about, right? Is it the motivation of the client or is it your motivation? And that can get muddy real quick. Why? Because we as helping agents, most of the time think we know what the person wants and needs. So it becomes our agenda. Well, you know, in your mind, I'm not saying you say this, but they need to do this. They need to do that. Sometimes we're even bound by that, by our procedures and policies. I have to get these things according to a deadline. I need these signatures. I need this documentation, right? And all of that is fine and good, but I want you to know that true motivational interviewing isn't about your motivation. It's not about you. It's about the person that is sitting across from you, right? And that can be confusing. For those of you who have ever coached, taught, trained, raised with any kind of supporting role, you know that sometimes you know better than the person that you are helping or assisting, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we do, just because of the walk of life, just like there are people that know better for us. And sometimes we don't like to hear that, but it's true, right? The motivational interviewing isn't your motivation for them to change. It's them identifying that in themselves and you creating a space for them to move into that energy to do it for themselves. Okay? Now, when you throw culture into it, it's a whole nother level of mess. Why? Because culture differences on their own can be a filter for incorrect approaches in helping folks, right? We assume everybody should want healthy eye contact. No, not in some cultures. Eye contact is interpreted as hostility. Like, what you looking at, right? And so the point I'm trying to make here is, if you are coming at your the people that you are supporting with a motivation to help them change, and you're not trying to be sensitive through a cultural lens, you might see resistance or lack of commitment or denial, any of those things that you see that are purely from a cultural perspective and have nothing to do with where the person is. Okay? This is important, and I think we miss it all the time. Now, if you know the state of the world we live in, it's impossible to know everybody's ethnicity and cultural and history and where they're from and why that matters. It's a lot. Even the people that do the work don't know all of that, right? So how do you even approach that? How do you know that what you're doing isn't culturally sensitive? Well, I got some ideas, and let's do the harm reduction thing. We know that largely what people of color are less likely to seek out mental health services, right? More likely to disengage and terminate because of trust and other historical issues, right? Of being oppressed or misinterpreted. They feel judged, they feel misunderstood, and the research is all over the place with regards to this work. We just don't have enough, right? But what we do have is common sense in our delivery to be sensitive to these things. All right, now, a lot of people say, well, if it's a Black client, just throw in a Black therapist. Okay, I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. As a Black man, I get it. However, that is not a fix-all. It is not it is just, look, just because they're Black or just because they've identified themselves as male doesn't qualify them to be a good fit for the client or the participant. That's a whole nother level of magic. And I don't know about your world. I've had plenty of people of color be wonderful people, wonderful influences in my life, life-saving. But I've also had other people outside of my race, identified race, be just as blessed gifts in my life and influences. So that's not color bound. So you can't just throw a woman in there or a Latino or whatever that you think because they are similar that they'll get it. Now, should it equip the person a little more of a perspective? Absolutely, but you don't assume that. When I was a psych professor, I cannot tell you how many functions I got invited to because I was a Black professor that they assumed that I would want to participate in because it was a Black function. Okay, first of all, you didn't even ask me what my ethnicity was. Let's start with that, because I could be a whole bunch of other things, right? And number two, you didn't ask me if I was interested in the cause. Don't assume because it's Black Theater Week that I want to watch a whole bunch of Black movies. That's an assumption that you have. Now ask me. And if I say, oh yeah, hey, then that's where you get the buy-in. So there's a lot of assumptions with the law of similarity. When it works, it's a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong, right? And there's some things that, let's say as a man, I'm not going to get the perspective as a woman. So sometimes you need that similarity, but it is not a fix. I just want to be, the most important is that third term right there, folks. And this is life relationships, not just helping ones, goodness of fit. Is it a good fit, right? Does the person challenge you? Do they support you? Is the space safe, right? Things like that. Is the work getting done? But are you in a comfortable place to do it? All of that. And let me tell you, a good supporting agent knows when to make you feel uncomfortable too. And a lot of people run from discomfort, like, oh, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel safe. Well, maybe you don't need to for whatever it is you're trying to change. There are, look, and you just pull up a nature video on YouTube and watch the mother bird push her chicks out the nest to fly. It looks cruel and unusual and in death, but look, the mother's like, it's time. I'm sorry. I love you. It's time for you to fly. Like, flap them wings or die. And you might think that that's insensitive. No, it's time. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that there are times to be uncomfortable, and we need to get comfortable with that. I'm tired of people saying I'm staying away from the conversation because it's uncomfortable. So what? Anything worth having in life is going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be some difficulty, some challenge. Okay, these are the tools of the MI, and I'm going to wrap up. These are the tools of the MI framework of open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, silence, and presence. That last one is really key to me because I always thought as a helping agent that I needed to say something. Like I needed it. You can't just sit there in silence because you're not doing any work. Folks, sometimes silence is the absolute best thing. Presence is the absolute best thing you can do for somebody. They don't need your advice. They don't need you to be filling it up with a jibber jabber or psychobabble. Be with the person. They will appreciate that much more than any kind of education or psychobabble that you can do. Okay. Now, what are some culturally sensitive strategies? Real quick. All right. I'm just going to go through them real quick. All right. Share some of your own personal information. Don't be afraid to share your story just because you're a therapist. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, you don't want to share to the point that it's all about you and not them. Your story should be brief and connected. But after that, you let them do the talk. But then it kind of minimizes some of that angst and some of the uncertainties that come to being in that kind of setting. Inquire about their ethnicity. There's nothing wrong with that. And you are not racist for doing so. You're racist if you make assumptions behind those identifications and start treating the person differently because of it. It's okay to ask. Acknowledging the struggles that you are familiar with that come from that cultural background. Be aware of the stigma, stereotypes, and intersections. I teach this stuff for a living, and I still go to classes, sessions, forums all the time because there's always more to learn, always. You can't possibly know it all, and it's okay to ask. And if a person's uncomfortable responding, you respect that and move on. You do the best you can with what you have wherever you are. Okay, strength-based, so I'm always affirming the person. And you know what I'm affirming them for? That has nothing to do with culture. I'm affirming that they made it into session. Thank you for coming today. I know you got a lot on your plate. It's good to see you. Let's start with that, right? As opposed to, well, what's wrong? And why do you look so tense? And you know, you didn't bring in that piece of paper we had talked about. Start with the good stuff, all right? Enroll them in their own recovery, right? That's the whole point of motivational interviewing. Don't you be the one talking and directing. Allow them to tell you where they want to go, even if that's opposed to where you think they should be. That's a tough one. All right. And also, you don't have to be the only agent of change. Seek out the support groups, circles, peers, whoever can help out. Okay, I think I've been, oh yeah, how about that? Knowing your limits. How about, that's why I saved it for last, right? Look, folks, we are not miracle workers, right? Like, look, and you will have better sessions than others, but there are also things that you're not good at, or you're not, you know, and you know, my training was clinical, but and trust me, just because I got a master's in clinical psychology did not qualify me to treat, diagnose, or assess every single category of disorders out there. Are you kidding me? Know your limits, get your focus, and do well with that particular group. But don't, yeah, anybody walks in the door, that's kind of a large ego, right? Okay, so know your limits, and that can be as effective as your intervention, right? Knowing where to not step in, okay? All right. One of the things that and this is just an example of one that is very culturally sensitive, meaning that you're using numbers rather than you're allowing the participant to come up with their own place of where they are and then where they might want to be. And it's a simple question. So I know you said you were feeling depressed today. Tell me, like on a scale of 0 to 10, like 0 being the absolute worst, the most depressed you've ever felt, and 10 being just ecstatic, joyful, great. Where are you today, right? Let them say 7. And they say, okay, well, hey, tell me what an 8 looks like. Tell me what a 9 looks like. What was it like when you were a 5, right? And where do you want to be tomorrow? Okay, like those are guiding questions for them to answer that have nothing to do with what you think, where you think they are, and they can be conversation openers. Okay, all right, y'all. How'd I do? Did I do okay? Look, I'm ready for a glass of wine now. Now, okay. Thank you all for anytime you want to continue the conversation, if you have other questions. There's my email address. Please reach out to me. I am now open for questions. You can ask me anything because I know everything. You know, just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, any questions? We have a few minutes, please. And please unmute yourself. Dr. McCree, did you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Please.
Not a question, just wanted to say amazing presentation. I can appreciate the the portion on culture and the fact that although some of us may look alike, and when we look out into the world, you know, all other cultures are not the same. All Asian cultures are not the same. All Hispanic cultures are not the same. And understanding that opens up a whole new dynamic for our clients when we're speaking to them, and allowing them to teach us about who they are and what goes on in their household. And I think that they appreciate that more. So I appreciate you sharing that portion in the motivational interviewing, because that is a way to also let them see that we're trustworthy.
Thank you so much for that share, Dr. McCreary. Your words are too kind. Look, and here's one other thing for everybody. It's okay to make mistakes. Making mistakes is being human. Look, I've offended my own race sometimes. I gave a compliment to a woman that was on the bus because her kids were so well behaved, and she frowned on me. She gritted on me when she got off the bus, and I realized I'd offended her. Because at the same time while I was complimenting her, I was also saying, oh, young Black single mothers can't have well-behaved kids. And that's how she looked at me like, well, what were you expecting? Kids to be tearing up everything on the bus and cursing at folks and stabbing people, like what? And I was like, you know, I got it. But the way she looked at me, I was like, man, I meant well. I think I need to be a little more sensitive. So you will make mistakes, and that's okay, as long as you're still willing to learn from
them. You have a question here.
Yeah.
More like compliment. What's up, Sal? It's Will Jr. How you?
Hey, what's up, brother?
Language is key, and we always thinking about the word change. Sometimes a modification and a little tweaking of it can help a person also, because that's what I do. I modify some of the things that I do.
Yeah.
Opposed to changing, because when people change, they want to be like Sal. And everybody at BHSB don't have that charisma that Sal's have. So the language is very important to me personally, because me walking on the cane, if I'm going to the ATM and I see some guys behind me, I wouldn't have the sense to think about keep walking. I would just go to the ATM and never know what happened. So the word modification, tweaking a little bit, that helps too sometimes, because everybody don't like that word change. But I always supported you in doing these trainings too. So that's a great job too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. The language is important. For me, I care less about the language as long as it's delivered with sensitivity. But the language is always changing. And for me, to your point, bro, is baby steps, right? Like everything doesn't have to be, you know, under that rubric of change, right? Like and everything that comes with that. The smallest steps sometimes make the biggest differences. And those are the tweaks and modifications that you're talking about. So I appreciate that very much. I think I'm out of time, but if we have one more, Shanetta, whatever you say.
Do you guys have any more questions? No, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. We really appreciate
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It was fun. Thank you all for your insights and contributions, and the people that know me that are here. You know, all love. Appreciate it. Hey, reach out to me at any time if you want to continue the conversation. Thank you.
I'm gonna give you some more PTO.